So picture this. It's the year 1609. You're a baker covered in flour, or I don't know, maybe a soldier trudging through ankle-deep mud.
Right, or even just a mother managing a chaotic, super loud household with like a half dozen kids.
Exactly. And for centuries, the overarching message you've absorbed from the religious establishment is essentially, well, this.
Hmm.
If you want to be truly holy, if you want a top-tier relationship with God, you need to quit your job, leave your noisy family, and lock yourself in a monastery.
I mean, it was a deeply ingrained, two-tiered system of Christianity. You had the spiritual professionals.
Right. The monks, the nuns.
Exactly, the clergy.
Yeah.
And then you had everyone else, just trying to survive the secular world and hoping they were doing enough to scrape by.
Yeah. The assumption was that the chaos of everyday life was this, like, insurmountable obstacle to genuine faith.
Oh, absolutely.
And honestly, I don't think we've entirely shaken that mindset today. I mean, have you ever caught yourself gripping your steering wheel in gridlock traffic or staring at an inbox with 400 unread emails and thinking, I could be such a better Christian if I just had fewer responsibilities?
Oh, all the time.
Right. Like if I could just retreat to a cabin in the woods for a month, I'd finally have the quiet time I need to be holy.
It is an incredibly pervasive feeling. We hold on to this romanticized, idealized vision of what a devout life looks like.
Yeah.
And that vision almost never involves sorting darks from lights in the laundry room or sitting in a windowless cubicle analyzing spreadsheets.
No, definitely not.
We naturally view the noise and the friction of our daily routines as the enemy of spiritual growth.
But our mission in this deep dive is to completely shatter that paradigm. We are going to explore how our ordinary, loud, chaotic, perfectly normal lives are actually the exact environments God uses to forge deep, resilient faith.
Which, that requires a profound shift in how we view our own environments.
A massive shift. And to navigate this, we are drawing from a stack of thematic analyses, historical summaries, and devotional reflections on a true masterpiece of spiritual literature.
Yeah, it's really a foundational text.
It is. It's a book called Introduction to the Devout Life by St. Francis de Sales, published right there in 1609.
Right.
Now, I want to set a ground rule for us today. We are keeping this entirely on a practical layman's level. We aren't going to bog you down with dense 17th century theological jargon or untranslatable Greek terms.
Thank goodness.
Right. We want to look at the sheer mechanics of his advice. We're unpacking how this manual, written over 4 centuries ago, can inspire you to love Christ more deeply and live for him more fully right where you are.
Not in the cabin in the woods you wish you lived in, right?
Exactly, in the life you actually have.
So, to fully grasp the magnitude of what Francis de Sales pulled off, you have to understand the shockwave this book sent through the culture.
Right, because of who he was writing to.
Exactly. He essentially wrote a comprehensive spiritual manual for the people left behind by the monastic system. He framed the book as a series of letters to a fictional disciple he named Philothea.
Which means lover of God, right?
Yeah, which simply means lover of God. And Philothea was the avatar for the everyday believer. She wasn't cloistered away.
No, she was busy.
Very. She was actively managing an estate, interacting with high society, dealing with petty neighbors, and carrying the mental load of daily life.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because Francis didn't just offer some nice life hacks for busy people. He executed a complete structural overhaul of who gets to participate in holiness.
He democratized spirituality.
Yeah.
That is the core premise of the entire work.
Yeah.
Devotion, he argued, is not a grim, detached existence reserved for a spiritual elite who have the luxury of meditating in silence for 10 hours a day.
Right.
He insisted that holiness is a universal call. He explicitly calls out soldiers, tradespeople, princes, and married couples, stating emphatically that they are all expected to achieve a profound level of devotion.
Which was radical for the time.
Incredibly radical. It bridged medieval contemplative traditions with what we now recognize as modern practical discipleship.
Oh, like the idea of vocation.
Exactly. This idea of vocation that later resonated so deeply in Protestant and evangelical circles.
He actually uses incredibly strong language about this, doesn't he? I mean,
Yeah.
he doesn't just say it's nice to be holy at work. He says it's a heresy to believe otherwise.
That's exactly right. He calls it an error, or rather a heresy, to try and banish the devout life from the soldier's camp, the mechanic shop, or the prince's court.
Wow, a heresy.
Yeah, he is arguing that God deliberately placed you in that specific environment. And to claim that you can't be holy there is to insult the architect of your circumstances.
So the environment isn't a mistake.
Right. Your faithful obedience within the secular world is the devotion.
But let me push back on that a little bit because I think a lot of people listening right now are looking at their own workplace or their own neighborhood and feeling completely overwhelmed.
Sure.
Isn't the world inherently distracting and, I mean, sometimes just inherently toxic? Like trying to achieve deep spiritual focus while navigating cutthroat office politics or scrolling past the outrage machine of modern social media?
It's exhausting.
It is. It feels like trying to diet while living inside a bakery. Wouldn't it just be infinitely easier and frankly more effective to just leave the bakery?
It's a fantastic analogy because, yes, physically removing yourself from the bakery eliminates the immediate sensory temptation of the donuts.
Exactly. You can't eat a donut if you aren't near one.
Right, and the monastery solution works on that exact logic. But Francis would argue that if God called you to be a baker, your job isn't to flee the building. Your job is to change the internal mechanism of how you interact with the sugar and the flour. He illustrates this with one of the most striking metaphors in the book.
Oh, you mean the mother of pearlfish?
The mother of pearlfish, yes.
I was completely captivated by this when I was reading through the material. Walk us through how he uses this.
So, in the scientific understanding of his day, Francis observed this specific fish that lives its entire life deep in the ocean. It is completely submerged in the salty, briny sea.
Right.
And yet, when you open up the mother of pearl, there is not a single drop of salt water inside it.
That is so cool.
It is. It navigates the intense pressure, the dark currents, and the overwhelming salinity of its environment. But it remains completely untainted by the salt.
Wow.
Francis uses this biological marvel to challenge you to build an inner sanctuary.
So you aren't physically leaving the ocean, you're developing an impermeable internal filtration system.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You have to learn how to filter out the brine of worldliness. Think about what the salt is in our modern context.
Oh, there's so much salt.
Right. It's the low-level anxiety hum of the 24-hour news cycle. It's the hyper-competitiveness of corporate ladder climbing. It's the envy generated by looking at curated lifestyles online.
It really is everywhere.
Francis is saying you can swim right through the middle of all that.
Yeah.
You can have a career, you can use technology, you can engage with culture without swallowing the salt.
You don't have to absorb it.
Exactly. You don't have to absorb the toxicity of your environment into your soul.
What I find so empowering about that is how it completely reframes our daily frustrations. I mean, when I'm sitting in a deeply frustrating, pointless meeting that definitely could have been an email.
We've all been there.
Right. Or I'm dealing with a client who is being completely unreasonable. My default posture is usually, this is a waste of my time. This is keeping me from the important spiritual things I could be doing.
Yes, that's the natural reaction.
But the mother of pearlfish metaphor flips that. That specific meaning, that exact difficult client, that is the salty sea. That is the exact laboratory where I get to practice swimming without drinking the salt.
And this brings us to a massive necessary pivot. Because if you're going to survive that kind of pressure, if you're going to swim in the salt without drinking it, you have to fundamentally redefine what devotion actually is.
Okay, how so?
Well, if your definition of devotion is just a checklist of religious activities, going to a service on Sunday, checking off a Bible reading plan, listening to a sermon, that checklist isn't going to help you when your boss throws you under the bus on a Tuesday afternoon.
That is so true. Reading a chapter in the morning doesn't automatically fix the Tuesday afternoon crisis.
Exactly. Your devotion has to be an internal state of being, not an external list of tasks.
Which is the heartbeat of this entire text. Francis strips away all the behavioral management and defines devotion simply as the prompt, diligent, and joyful perfection of love.
Yeah.
It's all about sacrificial action.
It's a brilliant distillation. He argues that anyone can do a good deed. A purely secular person can be philanthropic.
Right.
A completely burnt-out, cynical church member can still show up and hand out bulletins. You can do good things out of guilt, or out of a desire for social status, or even out of a fear of divine punishment.
But Francis says true devotion changes the temperature of the action.
Yes, it makes us do good things. To love sacrificially, earnestly, frequently, and with alacrity.
Alacrity. I love that word. Briskness, cheerful readiness. It's an eagerness to move.
Yeah, and to understand why alacrity matters, we have to look at the underlying mechanism Francis is using, which he borrows heavily from Augustine.
Okay.
It's the concept of rightly ordered loves.
Right. Because if we assume you, the listener, know the basics of Christian theology, you know you are supposed to love God and love your neighbor.
Right.
But the rightly ordered part is where the friction happens in real life. How does Francis map that out?
Augustine proposed, And Francis built upon the idea that human beings are fundamentally defined by what we love.
Hmm.
And sin, in this framework, isn't always about loving explicitly evil things.
Oh, interesting. So what is it?
Sin is very often loving fundamentally good things, but in the wrong order.
I see. Give me a concrete example of that. How do we love a good thing in the wrong order?
Well, think about your career. Providing for your family, using your intellect, contributing to society, those are inherently good things. You should love your work.
Sure.
But if you love your work more than you love your family, your loves are out of order. You will inevitably sacrifice your marriage or your relationship with your kids on the altar of your career.
Ouch. Yeah, that happens a lot.
It really does. Or take personal comfort. Rest and comfort are good gifts.
Hmm.
But if you love comfort more than you love the truth, you'll become a coward. You won't speak up when you see an injustice because it might make your life uncomfortable.
Wow, so the order dictates the outcome. It's like a solar system.
Exactly.
If God is the sun and he is at the absolute center of your priority list, his gravitational pull keeps all the other planets, your job, your hobbies, your friendships, your finances, in a perfect, healthy orbit.
Yeah.
But if you swap the sun out, if you make, say, your children the center of your universe, the gravitational pull is all wrong, the planets scatter and eventually crash into each other.
That's a perfect way to visualize it.
Holiness, according to Francis, is just the daily, rigorous practice of making sure the sun stays in the center.
And when the sun is in the center, it generates that alacrity we talked about. Think about how this mechanism completely rewires something as simple as volunteering on a Sunday morning.
Oh, this is such a vital point. Let's really look at that because modern church culture is just plagued by volunteer burnout.
Oh, completely.
You have two people showing up at 7 a.m. to set up chairs. One is operating out of weary obligation, and the other is operating out of what Francis calls affectionate devotion. What is the internal difference there?
Well, the person operating out of obligation is keeping a ledger. They are keenly aware of what they are giving up, their sleep, their free time.
Right, they're counting the cost.
Exactly. They serve because they feel guilty saying no, or because they fear the pastor's disappointment, or maybe they think they are earning points with God. They're
Yeah.
technically doing a good thing, but the fuel source is deeply toxic. It drains them.
But the second person,
The person serving out of affectionate devotion is animated by a totally different energy source. They aren't keeping a ledger because the act of serving is a natural, joyful overflow of their love for the architect of the universe.
here's where it gets really interesting. It reminds me of the difference between how kids operate.
Okay, how so?
Like if I tell my kid, go clean the garage, or you are grounded for a month, they will clean the garage.
Right, out of sheer survival instinct.
Exactly. The physical labor gets done. But they are going to drag their feet, they are going to complain, and the second I'm out of earshot, they are going to grumble about how unfair it is. The fuel is fear of punishment.
Yeah.
Now, imagine a different scenario. A child wakes up early on a Saturday, sneaks down to the kitchen, and makes a huge mess cooking a surprise breakfast in bed for a parent they absolutely adore.
The physical labor is still there. In fact, cooking that breakfast might be harder work than sweeping the garage.
Exactly. They are sweating, they are cracking eggs, they are working really hard. But the fuel is pure, unadulterated affection. They are thrilled to be doing it.
That's beautiful.
Francis is saying that God doesn't just want the garage swept. He wants this surprise breakfast energy. He wants us animated by joy, not obligation.
Yes.
When you run on obligation, you eventually burn out and grow bitter. When you run on affection, the work itself actually generates life.
The fire of love, Francis says, makes the soul prompt and active. But this raises a massive tension in the practical life of a believer, and Francis addresses it head on.
Because right now, someone is listening to this and they are saying, okay, I get it. I need the surprise breakfast energy. I need this prompt, joyful alacrity. But let's be honest. My faith feels incredibly slow.
Yeah, that's a really common struggle.
Right. Like, I've been a Christian for 20 years, and I still lose my temper with my kids. I still struggle with the exact same selfish habits I had in college. If this fire of love is supposed to be transforming me, why is it taking so agonizingly long?
Which is why the next section of his guidance is arguably the most psychologically profound and, frankly, the most comforting. Francis vehemently, aggressively rejects spiritual perfectionism. He understands that the Christian journey is a slow burn of grace,
A slow burn, I like that.
is a lifelong pilgrimage, not a sudden magical teleportation to the finish line. He drops this incredibly grounding rule: have patience with all things, but first of all with yourself.
First of all, with yourself. Man, we are terrible at that.
We really are. We extend grace to other people, but we hold ourselves to this standard of instant, flawless execution.
What's fascinating here is how Francis dissects our psychology with laser precision.
Yeah, he really does.
He recognized that when we experience that intense, burning frustration with our own moral failures, when we just hate ourselves for falling into the same sin again,
Right.
we assume that self-loathing is a sign of deep piety.
Right. We think, look how mad I am at my sin. I must really be holy.
But Francis says no.
Francis says it is often just spiritual pride in a very clever disguise.
Okay, wait, stop right there. I need us to really dig into this because this completely flips the script on how I view guilt. How on earth is being mad at myself for sinning a form of pride?
Because you have to ask yourself why you were so shocked and devastated.
Okay.
When you fall and you react with bitter, anxious self-loathing, what you're essentially saying to yourself is, I can't believe I did that. I thought I was better than this. I thought I was more advanced, more resilient, more holy.
Oh, wow.
You aren't mourning that you offended God. You are mourning the death of your idealized image of yourself. You are mad that you aren't the spiritual superhero you projected yourself to be.
That is, wow, so the ego is actually hijacking my repentance. I'm making my failure all about me and my bruised self-image rather than focusing on my need for God's grace.
Exactly. Francis points out that a genuinely humble person is never shocked when they stumble. Why would they be? They know they are human, frail, and utterly dependent on grace.
Right, they know their own baseline.
Yeah. When a truly humble person falls, they don't spiral into an existential crisis of self-hatred. They simply acknowledge their weakness, reach up for God's hand, brush off the dirt, and calmly start walking again.
That is a staggering paradigm shift, and it connects directly to how heavily he warns against spiritual anxiety. I notice he sets anxiety apart as something uniquely destructive.
He does. He categorizes this spiritual anxiety as the greatest enemy of the soul, secondary only to actual intentional sin.
Why is anxiety so dangerous, like neurologically and spiritually? What is happening when we panic about our own lack of progress?
Well, think about the physiological response to anxiety. It triggers the fight or flight response. Your amygdala takes over, and your vision physically narrows. You get tunnel vision.
Yeah.
The same thing happens spiritually. When you're anxious about your faith, you develop spiritual tunnel vision. You can only see your problems, your failures, the looming threats.
You completely lose sight of the bigger picture.
Exactly. You lose sight of the broader horizon of God's providence and care. Anxiety makes us functionally atheistic in the moment.
Ugh, functionally atheistic.
Yeah. We start acting as if the entire weight of our sanctification, the entire burden of our salvation, rests squarely on our own shoulders.
Yeah.
It completely chokes out that joyful alacrity we just discussed. You cannot be joyful and panicked at the same time.
But I have to play the skeptic here, because if I adopt this mindset of endless patience with myself, doesn't that just become a very convenient loophole for complacency?
Ah, that's the danger.
Right. If I just shrug and say, well, I'm a work in progress, God is patient, where's the line between resting in grace and just giving up on trying to be better?
The vital question, how do we distinguish patience from complacency?
Yeah.
The distinction lies in the response to the fall. Complacency stays on the ground. Complacency says, I fell, it doesn't matter, everyone falls, I'm just going to lay here in the mud.
Okay, and patience.
Patience, however, is deeply concerned with the fall, but it trusts God's process more than its own perfection. Patience stands back up.
So it's about the recovery.
Right. The believer who stumbles, feels genuine sorrow, repents, and takes the next step forward is already operating in the grace of God. Complacency is static. Patience is progressive.
The willingness to try again tomorrow is the proof of the pulse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
God works patiently, and we are called to align with His timeline, not our frantic, ego-driven deadlines.
So we've established that we need to swim in the salty sea without absorbing the toxicity. We need to operate out of joyful affection rather than weary obligation. And we need to fiercely battle anxiety by maintaining deep patience with our own slow progress.
That's the foundation, yeah.
That is a massive internal workload. I mean, willpower alone isn't going to get me there by 10 a.m. on a Monday. Where does the actual fuel for this come from?
Which brings us to what we should call the engine room of the devout life.
The engine room.
Yeah. If you don't build the engine room, everything Francis has said so far is just lovely, unattainable philosophy. The non-negotiable engines for all of this are structured prayer and meditation.
And there is a piece of advice he gives regarding prayer that is incredibly famous, deeply countercultural, and honestly, almost comical in how aggressively it challenges our modern priorities.
Oh, I know exactly what quote you mean.
He writes that everyone needs half an hour of prayer each day, except when we are busy. When we are busy, we need an hour.
It is the ultimate paradox of the spiritual life.
It completely defies our natural logic. I mean, if my schedule is packed, if I have 3 back-to-back meetings and my kid forgot their lunch at home, the absolute first thing that gets cut from my day is my quiet time.
Of course. It's the easiest thing to drop.
Right. I trim my morning reflection down to a quick 5-minute scan of a devotional, or I skip it entirely so I can hit the ground running. But Francis is saying no, when the demands are the heaviest, you must double your time in silence.
Because he understood the physics of the soul.
Yeah.
His logic is rooted directly in Jesus' words.
Yeah.
Apart from me, you can do nothing. Francis recognized that you cannot pour out what you haven't taken in. If you rush into a highly demanding, chaotic day without having anchored your soul in that hour of communion, you are running into battle with no armor and no ammunition.
You are running on fumes.
Exactly. And when you run on fumes, that is precisely when the salty water of the world seeps into the mother-of-pearl fish. That is when the anxiety takes over, the temper flares, and the obligation crushes the joy.
So the silence isn't a luxury, it's a strategic necessity.
Absolutely.
But how did he actually instruct people to pray? Because when you say mental prayer or meditation today, people picture sitting cross-legged and trying to empty their minds of all thoughts, which, let's be honest, usually just leads to thinking about your grocery list.
Right. Eastern meditation is often about emptying the mind, but Christian meditation, as Francis taught it, is about filling the mind.
Filling it. Okay.
He provides a highly tactical, accessible method. It starts by consciously placing yourself in the presence of God, not just acknowledging God exists somewhere in the universe, but realizing he is in the room right now, observing and loving you.
Setting the stage internally.
Yeah. Then you use your imagination to vividly visualize a scene from the Gospels.
Give us an example of how that visualization works.
Let's say you are anxious about a massive project at work. You close your eyes, and you vividly imagine the scene where the disciples are terrified in the storm on the Sea of Galilee.
Oh, that's a good one.
You don't just think about it abstractly, you engage your senses.
Oh.
You imagine the smell of the rain, the violent rocking of the boat, the panic in their voices.
Wow, really putting yourself in it.
Yeah, and then you picture Jesus, completely at peace, waking up and commanding the wind to stop. You place yourself in the boat. You let the absolute authority and calm of Christ wash over your own specific anxiety.
What happens neurologically when we do that? Because it feels like more than just a daydream.
It is much more. When you deeply visualize a scene of peace and divine control, you are literally pulling your brain out of the fight-or-flight loop. You are lowering your cortisol levels.
That's incredible.
You are physically and spiritually resetting your baseline before you step into the chaos of your day.
And then there is a final step to his prayer method that I found utterly fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
He tells the reader to gather a spiritual nosegay.
Yes, the spiritual bouquet.
So in the 17th century, cities were incredibly unsanitary. They smelled awful. So wealthy people would carry a small bouquet of highly fragrant flowers, a nosegay, and they would hold it to their nose as they walked through the filthy streets to mask the stench. How does Francis map that onto prayer?
He says that when you spend your half hour in meditation, you are walking through a beautiful spiritual garden. But you can't stay in the garden forever. You have to go back to your job, your family, your community.
Right.
So before you leave the prayer time, you must pick 1 or 2 specific flowers. These are highly actionable, specific resolutions based on what you just prayed about.
So not just vague goals.
Exactly. Not vague goals like, I will be a better person today. A specific resolution like, when my coworker takes credit for my idea in the 2.20 p.m. meeting, I will hold my tongue and remain at peace.
And you carry that specific resolution with you like a bouquet. So when the stench of the world hits you, when the coworker actually does take the credit, you mentally pull up that resolution to ground yourself.
Exactly. The goal of prayer isn't just to feel a warm, fuzzy sense of peace for 30 minutes. The goal is the resolution. It's taking the peace generated in silence and weaponizing it for the actual skirmishes of your day.
But let's apply this to our current reality. We don't live in 1609. Our world is infinitely noisier.
It's deafening.
We have smartphones buzzing in our pockets, smartwatches tapping our wrists, Slack channels pinging. How does a listener today realistically carve out this half hour of silence?
It requires a level of intentionality that, frankly, borders on the aggressive. You have to ruthlessly curate your environment.
What does that look like?
It might mean that your commute to work can no longer be filled with true crime podcasts or talk radio. You turn the radio off, and your Honda Civic becomes your cloister for 20
Well,
minutes.
Honda Civic Cloister.
Yeah. It might mean leaving your phone physically logged in the glove box of your car while you take a 15-minute walk on your lunch break to visualize that gospel scene. You have to claim the margins of your day because the world will certainly not hand you silence on a silver platter.
I love that. Reclaiming the dead space in your day and turning it into an engine room.
Exactly.
Okay, let's pivot because if we connect this to the bigger picture, you've guarded your time, you've done your mental prayer, you've gathered your spiritual bouquet and set your resolution.
Right.
And then you walk into your office or you walk into your kitchen, and within 3 minutes, someone pushes your exact buttons.
It always happens.
The pressure is on. How does all this internal devotion manifest externally? How do people actually see that you are a devout person?
This is where Francis introduces what I think is his most subversive concept, the power of the little virtues.
The little virtues. Because when we think of Christian virtue, we tend to think of the grand cinematic heroics.
Yeah.
The martyrs dying in the Colosseum, the missionaries giving up everything to move across the globe.
Right, the macro virtues, and those are real. But Francis understood that 99% of our lives are not lived on a cinematic stage.
Yeah.
They're lived in the grinding minutia of Tuesday afternoons. He argues that true spiritual maturity is actually measured by how you handle the micro moments.
So what are these little virtues?
It is demonstrated through everyday, gritty, unglamorous virtues: meekness, gentleness, humility, honest simplicity, and patience with annoying people.
This connects so perfectly to the core texts of the New Testament. If you know Galatians 5, these little virtues are exactly the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness. And it points straight to the words of Jesus in Matthew 11, where he doesn't say, "Learn from me, for I am a brilliant strategist." He says, "Learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart."
Exactly. But we have a profound cultural translation problem here. Our modern society, especially in the West, completely fundamentally misunderstands gentleness.
We really do.
We confuse gentleness with fragility. We equate meekness with weakness. We assume that if someone is gentle, it means they lack the power or the spine to assert themselves.
Which Francis completely rejects.
He obliterates that idea. He writes, "Nothing is so strong as gentleness, nothing so gentle as real strength."
But let me push back on that, because I can hear the objection from the corporate employee right now.
Go for it.
If you act meek in a cutthroat sales department or a hyper-competitive law firm, you are going to get run over. People will steal your accounts, they will talk over you in meetings, they will take advantage of your kindness. Isn't this advice just a recipe for becoming a professional doormat?
It's a very valid fear, but it's based on a flawed definition of the word meekness. Let's look at the ultimate archetype of meekness, Jesus Christ.
Okay.
When you look at his life, do you see a doormat? Yes, this is the man who patiently welcomed children when his disciples tried to shoot them away. He's the man who tied a towel around his waist and washed the filthy feet of his followers.
Very gentle act.
But this is the exact same man who stood completely silent and resolute before the terrifying power of the Roman Empire during his trial. He's the man who publicly, fiercely called out the corruption of the religious elite.
Yeah.
And he is the man who braided a whip of cords and violently cleared the temple when the sacred was being exploited for profit.
Right. No one looks at the cleansing of the temple and says, "What a weak, fragile guy." He possessed immense power, but it was perfectly calibrated.
That is the essence of the biblical concept of meekness. The Greeks often used the term to describe a wild war horse that had been broken and trained.
A war.
Yeah. The horse hasn't lost an ounce of its muscle, its speed, or its deadly power. But all of that immense power is now perfectly submitted to the bit and the bridle of the rider. It is power under absolute control.
Power under control. That changes everything about how we view the workplace.
It really does. True strength isn't being the loudest, most dominating voice in the boardroom. Any insecure person can yell.
So true.
True strength is having the intellectual power to absolutely devastatingly critique a coworker's flawed proposal, but choosing to hold your tongue because you know it would humiliate them publicly.
Yeah, holding back when you could strike.
Exactly. True strength is offering a genuinely kind, helpful word to the person who just gossiped about you. To absorb a blow and return it with gentleness requires an internal fortitude that the dominating, aggressive person knows nothing about. It completely subverts the world's power dynamics.
And it completely changes how the world views the Christian message. This brings up one of the most famous, memorable maxims to ever come out of Salesian spirituality.
I love this one.
He famously wrote, "A spoonful of honey attracts more flies than a barrel of vinegar."
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
He is hammering home the point that your holiness, if it is genuine, should be immensely attractive. It should be cheerful. It should be sweet and life-giving to the people forced to interact with you every day.
Which is a desperate word for our cultural moment, because we have developed a brand of Christianity today that is incredibly vinegary.
Vinegary is a good word for it.
People think that being truly devout means you have to be perpetually offended by the culture, rigid, sour, judgmental, and just constantly policing everyone else's behavior.
Francis argues that a sour Christian is a complete oxymoron. If your devotion makes you unbearable to live with, if your theology makes you mean, you have not encountered the true fire of divine love.
Wow.
You've just encountered your own ego dressed up in religious clothing. The honey is that controlled strength, that quiet, unshakable joy that makes a secular coworker stop and say, "Why are you so calm when the rest of the office is panicking? I want whatever it is you have."
But let's acknowledge the difficulty here. Practicing these little virtues, choosing to be the honey when the whole world is pouring vinegar, is incredibly draining.
Absolutely.
It takes a massive toll on your emotional reserves if you try to do it in total isolation, which is why Francis pivots to the absolute necessity of community, specifically how we curate our inner circle of friends.
So what does this all mean? He was a profound realist about the power of influence. He makes a razor-sharp distinction between what he calls vain friendships and holy friendships.
What's the difference?
Vain friendships are based on utility, or shallow shared interest, or just mutual flattery. They pass the time, but they don't elevate the soul. Holy friendships, however, are a completely different category.
Okay.
He writes, "A faithful friend is the medicine of life. Choose one amongst 1,000, but I say one amongst 10,000.
One amongst 10,000. He sets the standard for that inner circle astronomically high.
He sets it high because the stakes are high. If you are doing the hard, invisible work of building this inner sanctuary, you need allies who understand the architecture. And this speaks so powerfully to our modern crisis of connection.
Let's talk about that crisis, because we live in the most hyper-connected era in human history. We have thousands of followers, hundreds of connections on LinkedIn, group chats constantly firing off.
Right.
And yet every psychological study shows we are experiencing a profound, devastating famine of intimacy. We are drowning in connection, but starving for friendship.
Because digital connection, by its very nature, is curated. We present our avatars to the world.
Yeah.
We share our victories, our perfect vacations, our cleverest thoughts.
Yeah.
But Francis is urging the reader to find a friend, and he implies you only really need one or two to whom you can show your uncurated, messy, failing inner life. You need someone who knows exactly how much you are struggling with your temper.
Someone to show the real you to.
Exactly. Someone who won't just flatter you and tell you you're perfect, but will gently challenge you to grow in virtue. A holy friend acts as a mirror for your soul. They help you process the journey. Without that medicine, the sickness of isolation sets in.
And when you are isolated, that is exactly when you are most vulnerable to what Francis calls the small sparks of temptation.
This is a warning that requires acute self-awareness. Francis points out that the fire of misdirected love is far more aggressive and active than we like to admit.
Yeah.
He warns that you might think you are just receiving a harmless little spark, but you will be astonished to see how in a moment it takes possession of your entire heart.
We negotiate with the spark all the time. We are masters of rationalization.
Oh, completely.
We say to ourselves, it's just one harmless text message to an old flame, I'm just checking in. Or, it's just a little bit of creative accounting on the expense report the company owes me anyway. Or, my personal favorite, I'm not gossiping about this person, I'm just venting to a friend so I can process my feelings. We hold the spark, thinking we can control the burn.
And Francis warns that playing with the spark is a fool's game. His advice for dealing with small temptations is not to try to manage them or negotiate with them.
What does he suggest?
His tactical advice is immediate flight. Turn your heart violently and immediately back to Christ. Run to the cross.
Wow, just run!
Yeah, he uses this great imagery. Wolves and bears are dangerous, yes, but a swarm of flies can drive you just as insane if you stand there and let them cover you. You have to aggressively swat away the small compromises before they swarm your conscience.
The swarm of flies. It's the death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's not usually the massive scandalous failure that derails a person's faith. It's the slow, steady accumulation of tiny, unswatted compromises over a decade.
Yeah, that's exactly how it happens.
But as we look at the totality of this book, I want to end our deep dive on a concept that I think is the most piercing, most resonant idea in all of the material we reviewed.
I think I know which one you mean.
It's his theology of calling, of vocation. He writes this incredibly simple, devastating line: "Be who you are, and be that well." And later he expands on it, saying, "Do not wish to be anything but what you are, and try to be that perfectly."
It is the ultimate antidote to the great disease of the modern age: comparison.
Comparison truly is the thief of all Christian joy, and technology has completely weaponized it.
Oh, absolutely.
We can now peer over the fence into the highlight reels of billions of other lives. We look at other people, maybe they have a highly visible ministry, or a seemingly perfect marriage, or a massive platform, or limitless financial resources.
Can we start to tell ourselves a very toxic story?
Right. We say, I had their life, I could be really holy. If I had their platform, I could really do great things for God. But I'm stuck here in this boring job with these frustrating limitations.
The tragedy of that mindset is that it wastes the present moment. Think about how many believers spend years or even entire decades wishing they had a different spouse, wishing they were in a different career, wishing they lived in a different city.
It's heartbreaking.
And while they are perpetually staring over the fence, consumed by the illusion of someone else's life, they're completely neglecting the actual physical arena God has provided for their sanctification.
The actual arena. God didn't give you someone else's life to make holy. He gave you yours.
Exactly. To constantly wish you were someone else or somewhere else is actually a subtle form of arrogance. It implies that you know better than the architect of your life.
Ouch.
It implies that God made a logistical error in placing you where you are. Contentment, in the Salesian view, isn't just shrugging your shoulders and settling for a miserable life.
So what is it?
Contentment is a fierce act of joyful trust. It is the belief that God's wisdom in placing you in your specific current set of circumstances far exceeds your own understanding of what you need.
Be who you are and be that well. If you are a parent dealing with endless tantrums and sticky countertops, be that perfectly today. That changing table is your altar. If you are an accountant crunching numbers in a cubicle, be an accountant perfectly today. The spreadsheet is your chapel. You do not need to be a missionary in a foreign jungle to live a devout life. You just need to execute your current, seemingly mundane duties with a profound, sacrificial love.
It brings us full circle back to the revolutionary idea we started with. True devotion isn't an escape from reality. It is the deepest, most courageous possible engagement with reality, fueled entirely by divine love.
We have covered immense territory today. We've dismantled the myth of the spiritual elite.
Yeah, we have.
We've talked about the physics of rightly ordered love and the alacrity of the surprise breakfast. We've explored the mother of pearlfish swimming through the toxic, salty corporate sea without swallowing a drop.
That's such a great visual to keep in mind.
We've unpacked the vital necessity of having endless patience with your own frustratingly slow progress, recognizing that beating yourself up is often just ego in disguise. We've discussed the engine room of silence, the incredible power of the little virtues like controlled gentleness, and the profound freedom of simply blooming exactly where God planted you.
Yeah, it's a completely different way to live.
When you synthesize all of the wisdom packed into Introduction to the Devout Life, the takeaway is startlingly clear, and it is incredibly freeing. You don't need a monastery to find God. Your kitchen, your car, your loud and chaotic living room, these are the exact laboratories designed for your growth.
The ultimate goal, the absolute distillation of Francis de Sales' wisdom, is simply this: to live Jesus in the present moment. It is allowing His grace to turn your most ordinary, repetitive duties into beautiful, fragrant offerings of love.
Beautifully said.
And as we wrap up, this raises an important question. I want to leave you with a thought experiment to carry into your week.
Let's hear it.
I want you to picture the most difficult, frustrating, exhausting part of your current daily reality. The person who annoys you the most, the task you dread the most.
Got it in my head.
Now, if you truly, deeply believed that God specifically designed that exact circumstance as the perfect gymnasium you need to build your spiritual strength and your capacity for love, how would you walk into your day differently tomorrow morning?
What a profound, challenging reframing. The obstacle isn't in the way of your faith. The obstacle is the way.
Exactly.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. As you head back out into the noise, back to the inbox, back to the laundry, back to the commute, remember to grab hold of your spiritual bouquet. Take a deep breath, dive back into the salty sea, be exactly who you are, and be that perfectly.